Hello everyone, this is Bentley, and today I'm going to go over all of the foods that I feed in my fish room, currently and in the past, and what I like the most, why I use it, pretty much everything you need to know about what I think about fish food. Let's dive in, shall we? I'm going to kind of break this up into, I guess, three categories. Flake foods, granule or pellet type foods, and then kind of more specialty foods, if you will. Because each of them has a really important purpose. I use each for a different reason. And in specialty, I guess 1/4 category would be like really fine foods. So this might be specifically for fryer babies or just happens to be naturally a very fine powder. And I might use that for specific reasons. We'll get into that in just a sec. Just keep in mind, regardless of which of these fish foods I talk about, I buy all these out of pocket. None of this is sponsored. I've gotten like free samples at a store of some foods. So an example would be, say, Vibra Bites or like some of the Hikari micro pellets. I've had things like that were in-store samples that I've been given in the past. And, only one that I've ever really liked enough to go then and buy. With that all being said, we're going to skip the live foods because you guys know I've done an entire video on vinegar eels. It's a fantastic live food. I love it. But we're going to go into everything that is basically prepared with one exception. I'm going to start with flake food. I think flake, for me, I like flake a lot more than I like granules. I know a lot of people, like your Lucas Bretz, for example, tetracolor granules, that's his jam. That's the best food ever. And there's lots of other places that actually use Tetra's food. I just personally prefer a flake over a granule, though I do use several granule type foods. For me, it's easier for me to grind up a pellet in my hands really fine for small fish versus, leaving it as is. Also, typically my flakes will float a little longer. They don't immediately sink. So I'm going to go over everything I have. There's one flake I don't have currently with me. I've tried and I both like and dislike. So I will cover that in a sec. So number one is this stuff right here. This is a brand called Tropical, and this is their Supervit Flake. Now, there's a lot of different tropical foods I use. It's a pretty high quality food, and yet despite all of that, keep in mind, almost all flakes are pretty high quality these days. It's really rare for you to find a bad food other than Wardley's. Wardley's is just garbage. Don't use it. But as far as the way that they're constructed, their protein contents versus their fillers, almost all of them are pretty good foods. This stuff nowadays, it used to be really hard to get. Now you can get it on Amazon. So pretty hard to argue because it comes pretty cheap. Every once in a while you get a deal, like the last 3 tins of this, which this is, compared to my head, it's a pretty large tin. I got 3 tins of this stuff for $5 a piece because it was on an Amazon deal. I tried to buy more and they wouldn't let me at that price. I would have bought 10 at this price because I love this food. The good part about this food is that it does float a little bit longer, and it's just a really high quality mixture of fish meal and all that kind of stuff. Flake. It's really easy to powder up in your fingers like all flake foods are. If I was to use exclusively one flake right now based on what I've tried, this would actually probably be it, with a short contender being Tetracolor Flakes. I actually really like Tetracolor, and I know that a lot of people are going to be like, come on, man, Tetra? Yeah, seriously, Tetra. I've never had a fish that wouldn't eat Tetra Flake. Never. Kind of like the Tropical. I think they all love it. And what's funny is actually what's in this tin right now is not Tetracolor Flake. I'm technically out of Tetra right now, but I have so much of the Tropical that I don't need it. This is the last little bit of my Sarah Vipan, which I'll talk about that flake in just a sec. But Tetra's just a standby. Whether you like the granules or the flake, both their foods are high quality. If you've watched some of Corey of Aquarium Co-op's tours, which, shout out to Corey, when he did all the Israeli fish farms, everyone was using a super fine powdered version of Tetra granule. So that should tell you something about the quality of Tetra's food. It's really good. And that being said, they're big for a reason. There's huge distributions of it. You can get it relatively cheap. You can find it at a Fred Meyer, at your grocery store, or at Amazon, or your local fish store. I mean, it's a really popular food. And for a reason. It's good, and it's a great color enhancer for reds in the Tetracolor. This next food, though, is a little different. Yeah, a spirulina flake. And this is made by Zoomed, of all people, which I actually have 2 different foods that I use from Zoomed. I first got turned on to this stuff by Robert, the manager of the Aquarium Co-op, because when I first got my Leopoldi angels, this is one of the few things they were eating like crazy. They loved this food. Now, the downside of this, and I'll try and show you. It might be a little hard because camera, but never mind. This is the nearly empty one. The flakes come in really big. Like, they're seriously like this big, but it's super easy to grind up. So that being said, just be prepared to grind this up. I actually like mixing this pretty often for most of my fish. I will mix about like 25% of this with like 75% tetracolor or the tropical. You're going to find out I feed a lot of foods because I like mixing them so that I can get kind of a varied diet and get my fish to eat anything. Now, that's kind of like cheating with rainbows and guppies because they will eat just about anything. This actually has been really good for the shellies. So the Neolamprologus multifasciatus, they love this stuff. And that's why I recently found out you can buy these in free packs on Amazon for like $10 a tin or $11 a tin. It's super, super cheap. I'll have a link below if you want to try this, if you like a spirulina-based food. For some of the like Africans and stuff like that, this is actually a really good food if they're naturally kind of an algae feeder, like a lot of shellies and some of the others. So that being said, we'll go on to the last food. I don't actually have the tin of it. It was sitting in the tetracolor tin, and that's Saravipan. I have like mixed feelings on this food. And let me explain. I love the fact that it's supernatural. It's actually it's a super high quality food. Sarah makes really good food in general. But I've seen half of my fish just won't touch it. And then some of the other ones, like the fish, when I showed the fluval flex off, those rainbows, they have the last of my Saravipan because they love that food. I mean, the second it gets near the top of the water, they are destroying that stuff. They absolutely love it. And it's got a mix of spirulina in it naturally. It doesn't have all the dyes and stuff like that, so it's not really going to color enhance like some of the others if you want a color enhancing food. But it is, in theory, better because it has a lot less potentiality for artificial stuff. That being said, keep in mind the fillers that are in most of our flake foods, as long as there's not too much synthesized proteins, so like proteins that are coming from non-animal sources for our more carnivorous fish. Carnivorous? I was about to say that terribly. Anyway, for those like omnivorous and carnivorous fish that need a higher protein rate, getting things that are like, say, soy or something like that can be bad for them long term. The Vipan lets you skip that. And in general, most people who I know who have tried Vipan have really liked it because it is a really nice food. I've just seen like half of my fish just not even touch it when I feed it. So because of that, like, I'm really selective where I feed it. But the fish that do eat it, it just disappears. And it's just gone immediately. So that's a good sign. So that's kind of like the flakes I've tried. I know that I've had this question in the past, so I'm going to answer it now. Have I tried, or do I like North Fin food? Because that seems to be like the darling in the spotlight right now. I've never tried it, and I don't really need to, if that makes sense. Let me explain. So I've had so many other flake foods I've tried. Like, there are some other stuff that I've tried, and I can't stand. They're cheaper brands. You can figure it out. Like, I don't like Tetra Min, but I like Tetra Color. I just think the color is a better line. There's some other foods that I've had little sample packs of from kind of like no-name places. Like, there's a flake food that Brine Shrimp Direct carries, for example. And this is nothing to make fun of Brine Shrimp Direct's products, but my fish just didn't really go for it. And it was like some discus formulated stuff that a friend gave me when we did a big bulk order of brine shrimp eggs. They didn't really care about it that much. They just kind of looked at it and were like, yeah, okay. It's like, all right, I guess not, So there's some stuff I'm not interested in. Like some of the stuff like Gemco has like an earthworm based flake and some stuff like that. I don't necessarily want something that's that singular. I like the more mixed stuff until I start looking at granule foods. So, speaking of granule foods, I have two different tropical. Again, this is that Supervit line. It's basically the same stuff. It's just a different like granule versus flake formulation. This is the normal size granule and this hulking tin here. And these are the mini granules. I bought a ton of this stuff when the retailer that I used to know, which is a shout out to Cascadia Aquatics. They're really awesome. I'm going to show a product they carry very soon that is, oh man, it's amazing food. Anyway, before this stuff became way more common and got into places like Amazon, Sarah, who owns Cascadia Aquatics, used to carry this food. I bought quite a lot of it when I tested from her. And when it was like commonly sold on Amazon, she wanted something a little more boutique, I guess is the way to put it. Or like, just she wanted like the super high, hard to find stuff. She wanted to have that as her niche as opposed to fight Amazon, which I don't blame her at all. So she moved on, and she had a bunch of like the granules like this, and I just bought her out because the stuff's really good. So I have the Supervit line in these two, and then I have one more. Let me grab that. So this is the other one that I have that's in the Supervit line. The tropical line. This is their soft line for South American fish. I'll get it into the focus range here. These actually, instead of a granule, are like a small stick, so kind of like Vibrobites, which is really good because it does simulate kind of that insect shape like a bloodworm would. The Leopoldi angels are the only ones that get this food. That's not true. I give it to the Kochu tetras too in small amounts just because I only have this little bitty tin. It's mixed in with some other food. They love this stuff. I mean, this stuff's actually really popular with them, and the soft line is really designed specifically for South American fish that are omnivorous or carnivorous. So if you wanted to do something like discus and things like that, although tropical does have a specific discus formulation too, this is actually a really cool food to try out. If you have a lot of tetras, give this stuff a little whirl, if you will. Otherwise, I would look at if you really like granules and you want to try tropical, I would go with the mini granules. They're a little smaller. It's a lot better for like your tetras and stuff like that. If you have mostly large fish, the mini granules are still fine, but you might just try the big granule. Also, I think you get, by weight, a better deal on the big granule than the small granule, if I remember correctly. But this isn't all the granule food I do. We've also got this stuff. Bug bites. So I actually really like bug bites. You'll notice I left this tin. I had a ton of these, and I used one as my rubber band holder. So like, if I see it says rubber bands, this is for all the rubber bands that I keep around the house for bags. But this is the only tin I have left of it. Because I haven't ordered more quite yet. But I actually really like this food. My experience with this is I bought the larger granule because there's like the community small granule formulation, then there's the large granule. The small granule wasn't like around the Seattle area quite yet, so I tried the large granule. The rainbows really liked it, but a lot of the smaller fish couldn't eat it. And then I happened to get lucky and win a bunch of it out of a contest that Fluval had when they first released this stuff, and I've had this really heavily in my fish room for a while, and I've never seen a fish not touch it. It's kind of like the Hikari Vibrobites, which is the other food that I really like that I don't have, so I'm going to lump these kind of together. So Hikari Vibrobites and Bug Bites, I think, are both really, really good foods, and they're not terribly expensive. This little thing of granules, which will last you a long way, is like $7, something like that, which it's soldier fly based, soldier fly larva. So it is insect-based, which is closer to what your fish are eating in the wild. Lots of insects, typically, unless you're going like hardcore predator fish. So that's actually really good because it's closer to a wild diet that can be really, really good for our fish. And then the Vibrobites, they're little red sticks. They look kind of like bloodworms. There's a lot of fish that eat those, including I've noticed like people have gotten puffers eating them, which puffers notoriously won't touch pre-prepared foods unless it's like, stales and all that kind of really true crustacean stuff as opposed to like a flake or a granule, and they'll get those eaten. I'm actually out of my Vibrobites currently. I like it a lot, but I kind of like it for specific fish, so I like giving it to the angels. I like it as a treat food for the rainbows, but not kind of my staple. And I think it's a good mix-in. Like if you were using it once or twice a week with some other food, I think that would be good, and mix in some frozen too. Really good that way. With the Bug Bites, on the other hand, I would use this as a staple. I would feed this like 3 or 4 days out of the week and then mix in the other foods as the treat foods or the ways to round out the diet if I wanted, say, like that spirulina flake from ZooMed instead of just the soldier fly larva. One more granule food I want to talk about. The co-op stuff. I know it's kind of like a pellet, but pellet and granule, the larger stuff, I kind of lump them all together. Actually, there's one more pellet I'm going to talk about, but I actually really like the co-op stuff. One, by the amount of food you get, it's pretty cheap. I think like a bag like this is $10 when it's filled all the way to the brim, and it's a small. Like you can see they're pretty small, but they float really well. They stay floating for a really long time, which a lot of our granules sink pretty quickly. So if you have species that specifically stay at the top, this is a really good feeding option. The aquarium co-op stuff. It's also just designed really well. You can see all the stats on it online. I really like it. It's just one of those things where like I tend to feed more flake than granules. So this is kind of a food that I treat like a treat. because it stays floating, but there's some fish that struggle to get it, like tanks that have cories and stuff. So I tend to feed some other foods, and we're going to start looking at those in like the first part of the specialty foods in tabs. Okay, I lied. I have one more pellet food. New Life Spectrum. So, focus. This is their cichlid formula. I got a ton of this from a friend when he was getting out of the hobby from freshwater. So he does both fresh and salt, and he was getting out of the freshwater side. And this actually, because it's the smaller pellet, it's not the really big one, it's actually pretty good for adult rainbows. And at the time, I had some apistos. I had some really old boys that were just kind of trolling about still, and this was pretty good food to give to them. But honestly, I don't like the pellets like this. I just don't. I think they're too big, and usually I have a want to put them in a food processor and grind them up. Now, the nice part about New Life Spectrum is it is a pretty high-quality food, and what it's made from is nice, and I'm sure that, if you ask other people that are like really into New Life Spectrum, just like there's other people really into pick a food, right? I'm sure it's great, but I would rather use just some of the other stuff that I've been using because I've had the best success with those foods. So that being said, let's dive into some of the specialty foods, because I really like this stuff. So I'm going to start with the stuff that I feed bottom feeders, so like plecos and cories. First off, going back to the bug bites well, I love the pleco formula stuff. This is the ones that are kind of like a big stick. There's also the specific bottom feeder formula. I actually really like this stuff for both plecos and cories. This isn't necessarily my go-to anymore. I used to use this, and I still rotate these two foods around quite a bit because I just think that the bug bites food is made so well, and it's so good for fish. But the stuff that I really like when it comes to like a sinking food that is designed for my bottom feeders is this stuff. Am I out of focus? Have I been out of focus this whole time? I know what you're going to say. You're going to be like, Bentley loves the Supervit line way too much. I kind of do. But this is the Tropical Supervit Tablet B. So this is a sinking tablet. It's really small. It's like the size of a breath mint. And I mean like a small breath mint. But this sinks really fast. It doesn't degrade very quickly. It's a pretty solid little tablet. And more importantly, because it doesn't fall apart really fast, it doesn't dirty the water very much, it gives your bottom feeders plenty of time to get to it and munch on it. When I throw this stuff, they've gotten really used to it. The cories and the plecos come out. The plecos come out of their caves. The cories come out from the plants. And they are hunting this stuff down. Now, there's another different food that I'll do the same thing with. And I get pretty similar results, but this stuff especially, they absolutely love. And I cannot speak probably more highly about this when it comes to loaches, corydoras, and some plecos. Now, depending on the pleco, you might need something a little more carnivorous than this, or a little more omnivorous than this, a little more, algified or whatever. And if you need the more algae side, let me show you this stuff. Sarah's line of veggie tablets. I actually really like this stuff. It's like your ONIP tabs, where it'll stick on the glass. And I want to pull one out for you. So you can see it's just a big green tab. It's a vegetable-based tab. So you can stick this on the glass for guppies, mollies, swordtails, all that kind of stuff. Whatever you want to get a more vegetable-oriented diet for the day, and maybe you just want to mix this in with your carnivorous foods or your omnivorous foods a little so often. What I like doing with the stuff is just throwing it in the water so it goes down and letting either my plecos, or what I really like giving this stuff to are the zebra autocinglus. This is actually kind of like their staple between this and fresh zucchini that gets devoured pretty fast. We never find one of these tablets in the water left over after a day of feeding. So, pretty good food. Sarah, good idea. So, since we've kind of covered a tab, right? Let's go to the other tabs. You know what this is. The head-to-head competitors. So, you have Sarah ONIP, and then Tropical's Supervit Tablet A. They're the same thing. They stick on the glass. They're built for omnivorous feeders. The Tropical is actually slightly smaller by tab, than the ONIF, but you get more tabs in the bottle. The weight ends up being like these weigh slightly more for their 100 tab bottle than the like 340 tab bottle of the tropical, but the tropical is slightly cheaper. I think they're both really good. If you can get Sarah locally from a local fish store to support them, and you can't get tropical, get the Sarah. They're both basically the same food. I use them in the same fashion. And you guys have seen like fantastic photography that's done from all sorts of fish where they'll put the tab on you put the tab on the glass and then you get all these fish coming in. It's easier to shoot them and stuff like that. But more importantly, it's just a really good food and fish eat it. I don't really do this like the bigger rainbows, like the full adult rainbows. I don't put this stuff in, but like the guppies and tetras. I'll throw some of these. I'll even throw some of these. Let them sink down to the bottom for corridoras every once in a while. And I've tried this food with my Shelleys, but I didn't have very good success. I just was better with flakes and stuff like that. So, that just might be my colony. But in general, I like this stuff. The angelfish, also good one for this one. So most of your small, kind of typical nanofish, these two are great foods. It's just whatever you can get more easily. If you don't have a local fish store, you don't have a place that carries the Sarah stuff, look into the tropical because it's easy to get off of Amazon. If you do have a local fish store that carries Sarah, buy the Sarah just because it's local and support your local fish store. Otherwise, really, the price difference in the end is not huge. I think this stuff, the tropical, is slightly cheaper, but the difference is not a ton. So just keep that in mind. They're both really high quality stuff. The Sarah's quality, tropical's quality. It's kind of like a pick your favorite. I have both and use both regularly. So when I run out of Sarah ONIP tabs, I'll buy another thing of ONIP tabs, and I mix between the two. Like I will one day a week I will do Sarah tabs. One day a week I will do tropical tabs, and then through the rest of the week I'll usually mix in some kind of flake in the fish that eat this kind of food. Okay, so that covers all our like tab and granule kind of foods. I want to go into some other specialty foods before I go into like the super fine foods that I use for fry. And that, if you probably already can predict this, but it's this stuff. I'm not even going to cut this and make it fancy. It's Repashy. I actually have 3 bottles on hand. That'll show you like how much of this I use, and I'm missing one. I'm out of Soylent Green. So I like the community formula. My personal favorite actually is probably the Spawn and Grow. Focus. Hey. And then Bottom Scratcher. So I'll mix this depending on what tank it's going to. So if it's Zebra Autos or Plecos that I'm trying to feed, I would do 50% Bottom Scratcher. Unless it's a wood-eating Pleco, then there's the Morning Wood with 50% Spawn and Grow. And my actually favorite formula, if you really want Plecos, 50% Bottom Scratcher, 25% Soylent Green, 25% Spawn and Grow. That gives you the little extra protein boost from the Spawn and Grow, but keeps it mostly kind of vegetable and Bottom Scratcher oriented for your like bottom dwelling fish. Pretty good mixture of food overall. Now, for most of my generic fish, like the rainbows and stuff like that, Community Plus is the big one with small amounts, maybe 10% of the Soylent Green just to get that extra veggie in there. And then again, a little bit of Spawn and Grow in there as well, just to make sure that there's that kind of high protein that's good for a mixture of fish. I really like Repashy just because it's no filler. However, it takes a little work to make, so I don't make it very often. This will be something I feed like once a month as opposed to once a week. But when I have it, I'll feed it out for, almost every day for a few days, and then the fish will go for a while before they have Repashy again. So that kind of covers all the specialty foods. I'm going to go into some of the super fine powdery foods and where I use those. We're going to start with a Sarah product. That's Micron. So some of you might use golden pearls, and you'll know if you watch my rainbow tutorials that for raising rainbows, this is my go-to is Sarah Micron. Now, mostly that's because it's local and available easily at 3 different fish stores. Primarily, I go to Aquarium Co-op. But no, seriously, I love Sarah Micron. It's a plankton and spirulina oriented food, so it's not like golden pearls is more brine shrimp oriented. It's a super high protein. I actually really like this a little more because I've noticed for my rainbow babies where I have to have super low flow, so I can't really have the filter doing a lot of work for me. This tends to feed slightly cleaner than the golden pearls, and maybe that's just because the golden pearls I have to be even lighter handed with than I do with the micron. But in general, I really love this food. This is between 5 and 50 microns. It's a super tough, super fine, super powdery food. You really only need it for teeny tiny babies for a short period of time, and a tin like this, which you can tell it's not a very big large tin. This lasts me like a year and a half. This is only my second tin, and I've just barely cracked into it. But if we're going to larger fish, I got one for you. That was Babylon about aquarium co-op. I love aquarium co-ops fry food. You get the little squeezy bottle, and it's like $10 or whatever, and then you can later on just buy like a big pouch of it and refill it with like a funnel or whatever, and keep the squeezy bottle, so you don't have to buy a squeezy bottle every time, and then it gets cheaper. And this is really good, like guppies especially. This is actually one of the most staple foods in my guppy tank, because it's so fine that it's really easy to get down into the babies. And also, it's just a good mix of proteins and all that kind of stuff. It's a good, cheap food. But again, like I said in other flake foods, most of the flake foods are really good. So if you want to take the time, if you're like, no, I only use North Fin food, grind up your North Fin food, get it nice and fine so your babies can eat it. You have the same thing. You're not going to get the sweet squeezy bottle, but if you're resourceful, you can figure out where the squeezy bottle comes from. However, I just think in general, for the cost and like how much food you get in this, because keep in mind, here's your size of your squeezy bottle, right? Those of you who work in the food industry, you know what this is. But this squeezy bottle is basically like the largest tin of flake food pre-ground up, so there's no real gaps in here for air. So this actually is a lot of food, and it lasts a very, very long time. I think it took me, with a big Endler colony upstairs in my room, like 300 plus fish. At one point, over 600 fish in a 20 log. But really overfiltered, so don't worry about it. I think it took me like a year to use up one of these things of food. And I was feeding it, if I was feeding it once a day. Now, if I fed this twice a day, like I should, because I would mix my food up. I was feeding a lot of live baby brine shrimp too. But, this is going to still last you a long time. Or if you use lots of tanks, like if you keep a lot of guppies, I would totally look at this food. Or if you want to go really fancy, so this is the stuff I was talking about. This is carried by Cascadia Aquatics. I don't know of anybody else that's carrying the premium food. And it's literally just its name brand is premium food. Just kind of funny to me because it was one of those things where I kept looking for like who the manufacturer was to see some information on it, and all it was premium food. But this particular line is the Super Blue, which I have not seen too many blue enhancing foods, and having used this, it is a super fine powder, just like the Aquarium Co-op fry food. It's almost the exact same size. This actually is really, really good, but I wouldn't feed this as a staple just because it is, it's not really expensive, but it's slightly more expensive. So like if you'd pay $10 for the Co-op fry food, I think these are like $14 for this pouch, which it's about the same amount by weight. But if you're feeding us, say, like 3 times a week, like I am, and I have like 6 bags of this stuff lying around, it's so good. It's so good if you have blue guppies. Now, they also have a red formula, and then they have a neutral formula, which is really good for like if you have your greens or your metals, your purples, your yellow, especially yellow. Like if you do yellow guppies, like the tiger or El Tigre, the yellow king tiger, the rainbow tigers, like all those kind of stuff, like the Lucas Brett's ones. This stuff, but the neutral line, the one that's just the guppy food, not one of the color enhancing foods, is amazing, amazing food. It's a little more expensive. You're going to pay for that like super high quality. It's German made, and like I hate to like make fun of that part, but it's just it's a little gussied up for a flake food. But that being said, I've had extremely good results with this, and I've kept buying it. So when I was at that swap meet that I talked about in Plants for Profit, which video up there in the corner, I bought more. I was just about to run out. As soon as Sarah from Cascadia Aquatic showed up, I was like, hey, did you bring bags of the blue food? And she's like, yeah, of course I brought it. I was like, cool, I need like 3. And then just, here's the money, take it, I don't care. I just love that food, and it gives me something that's good. Like, I think feeding this is a color enhancer. So if you had either the red or whatever, I say 3 days out of your 7 days a week. And because it's a super fine powder, it's really easy to get to fry. It spreads out really well. And then mix in a different food is more of your staple. So you have something slightly cheaper that you're not worried about for, say, color enhancement. You'd have a really good mix. One last food in like the specialty category. And then I want to cover shrimp food just because it is its own little special thing, shrimp food. But I keep shrimp, so we'll talk that too. I really like this New Life Spectrum, the Hex Shield. So this is the medicated food for internal parasites. And there are some other stuff. I've been really looking to find a good medicated flake, just because I have to run these pellets through a food processor to get it powdered up for a lot of my small fish when I do need it. And you have to feed it for many, many days, 2 times a day to really get the full kick. But I have seen really good effect with this food in the past. It just happens to be the only medicated food I keep. And I just kind of wanted to give it a little highlight because I think it is pretty good. It's really expensive, though. I think it's more expensive than it should be. And I would love to see... And I mean, by all means, in the comments below, tell me if you know a really good medicated flake. If it's by some like person I've never heard of. Let me know. I'd love to try it in the future should I need another medicated food. Right now, I haven't needed it, but sometimes I'll get in fish that I'll quarantine that aren't in great shape. And if I think I really want to make sure where they're eating really well, I'll try an antiparasitic medicated food for a few days in combination with my antibacterial of choice, whether that's erythromycin or metronidazole, or we could go down the list, just to make sure that that's getting in their system and really attacking those parasites really well, especially the ones in the gut. Let's talk shrimp food. So there's 2 shrimp foods I really like. The first one you might not really suspect, and I'm leaving the price tag on this for a reason, because I want you to see how cheap it is. This is the Zoomed nano banquet blocks, which are really high in calcium. So you see, it's like it looks like a mini Wonder Shell or something almost, right? Where it's a big block. This stuff is really sweet because it's really high in calcium. But more importantly, I don't know if you can read that. It's basically 50 cents a serving. So each one of these is, 50 cents because it's $3 for the 6 of them, at least at Aquarium Co-op, which is where I get this stuff. And I've fed it to all my Neos that I've had. So back when I used to have cherry shrimp and my blues and now my yellows, they all love this stuff. They go for it quite a bit. And the yellows especially, I've noticed when I put it in their tank, all of them came running to the front where it was and just started going hog wild on this stuff. And eventually it will slowly dissolve in the water, kind of like a Wonder Shell will, but it's a lot slower. It's not designed to just put stuff into the water column. But if they don't eat it, it will, and it'll just add a little extra calcium to your water system because it's a really high calcium food. And that being said, the last food is this stuff. Shrimp King. I really like the Shrimp King food. I actually think it's really good. But I haven't used a lot of shrimp food, so let's be clear. You guys have seen most of my tanks. I leave a lot of algae for my shrimp on purpose, and I will feed them every 3 days with something like Shrimp King, and then one banquet block a week or so. I think for me that's just a really good mix. I don't have super huge shrimp colonies. I'm not trying to be like the Shrimp King of Seattle. That's not my jam. There are people that are far better at shrimp than I am, like Corvisosca and Joel. But I do really like this food. I've noticed that for my Neocaradinos, they really like the complete, the snow pops, and the mineral. But they don't really touch the leaf mix and the protein, which is in the 5-in-1. So if I were to do it in the future, I'd probably just do Shrimp King complete. And a 1 tin of the snow pops is kind of like the treat food, right? Just to pop some extra colors. But in general, I just think the Shrimp King food's really great, especially mixing it with the banquet blocks. Gives that nice calcium food source for my fish. For my shrimp. Terrible. Anyway, for my shrimp. And then beyond that, I just let them graze on algae. I tend to let those tanks create a lot of algae and biofilm and stuff like that so that they can graze. But then every few days, typically about 3, but sometimes only once a week. It depends on which tank it is. I'll add a supplement food like the Shrimp King or the Banquet Blocks just to make sure that they're getting extra calcium in their diet and some of the other things they need that they're not going to necessarily get out of just the algae. So that covers flake, granules, specialties, powders, shrimp food. In the end, what are my favorites? Right? That's probably what you really want to know. Waded through all that to find all the stuff I've fed, and what's my favorite food? This might surprise you because I haven't shown it yet. I'm going to cheat. Brine shrimp eggs. Live baby brine shrimp. The best food. Plain and simple. But it comes in a big tin like this. So it's not true live culture food. Right? But seriously, I really think that more people should be using live food where they can. If you can keep Daphnia, if you can keep scuds, vinegar eels, baby brine shrimp, I think is like probably the best food out there just in general. But any of those microcrustaceans and things like that, they're just really good for our fish. It's something that they eat in the wild, they get naturally. Sort of like insect-based foods. If you happen to cultivate something outside, feed some live food. It's really good for your fish. But I know what you're thinking. Like, Bentley, don't preach to us about brine shrimp. I don't want a brine shrimp. Show me which of those easily accessible foods it requires no work. I just open the tin, put the food in, close the tin, and I'm done. Okay. Does this work? I can't choose. I seriously can't. I like all these foods because I think each one has a purpose. Like the guppies. Co-op fry food, and then a little touch of that Super Blue Cascadia Aquatics premium food. The Tablet B for Corey's. The either Sarah Onip or Tablet A for all my other small fish. The Spirulina Flake for especially the Shellies, but almost every fish. Tropical Flakes. I use all of this. I'm not kidding you guys. I throw all the speck on the table beside me that's holding it up. I seriously do use all of these foods. This is probably my favorite, just generic staple, but as much as I would use this food, I would use that spirulina flake, or I've tried the Cerevipan, or I'll put in some Onip tabs, or I'll throw in some bug bites. I mean, I really do mix my foods up quite a lot. And part of the reason is I don't want my fish to get so used to only one food that they'll only eat one thing, and then have some kind of weird nutrition issue in my fish. It's really what it comes down to. I think that we should feed varied diets to all of our fish. It's just better for them. So, with that being said, what's your favorite food? I want to know that down in the comments. Tell me your favorite food. Is it a granule? Is it a flake? Who makes it? Why? Why is it your favorite? Is it cobalts? Is it Northfin? Is it tetracolor granules? Your Lucas Bretts? You refuse to use anything other than that food. Have you tried the tropical stuff? Do you like it? Like New Life Spectrum, Omega. I mean, there's a ton of foods out there. I want to know what you guys use. You've seen everything I use in my fish room. I hope you enjoyed this. I want to know more if you guys want to know kind of more stuff like this, like, what kind of foods I use or how do I fertilize or things like that. Let me know that kind of stuff. If you guys like this if you guys like this content and videos like this, please give me a little thumbs up. If you didn't like it and you think that all the foods I use are terrible because you only keep flower horns and only feed them live food, go ahead and hit that thumbs down twice, all right? That way I know you really hated it. As always, guys, thank you so much for watching, and stay awesome. You're okay. You're okay. I gotta wait for Fox to stop moving around her cage, making all the racket. You good, baby girl? Yeah. Hi, sweetheart. Okay. That should be obvious by the hat, which, by the way, this new hat, I picked this thing up. I love this thing. I'm just saying. I'll give, all the plugs in the world to Corey because I love this hat. He told me that he was bringing this thing in at AGA, and I told him whenever he gets it, I want one. And as soon as he announced that it was available, I didn't even try to get one for free. I just paid for it. So, plugged it perfectly according to co-op.